guys, it's Lexi and welcome back to my channel. April was such a productive month of reading. I mean, I only read 8 books, but 2 of them were 5 stars and a lot of them were huge, so give me that credit. I want to start off with the second book that I read this month because it just needs to be talked about first and foremost throughout this video. And as always, I'm going to be referring to my reading journal because I can just look at my thoughts and reflections, and that's kind of the whole purpose of me getting this, is to use for reference. Funny Story by Emily Henry. I don't know why I waited so long to pick this up. Well, no, I do. It's because this came out a year ago, and if you know anything about books, hardbacks usually come out first, and then about a year later the paperback comes out, and I kind of have an aversion to hardbacks. I'm getting over that because I actually just bought like 3 hardbacks yesterday. But on top of that, there were just so many reviews for this hyping it up, saying how amazing it was, and I was thinking that's probably overhyping it just a tad. It's probably not as fantastic as everyone makes it sound like it is. Oh my gosh, it is. I need to just go with the masses. If something is popular for a reason, 8 times out of 10, it's because it's good. So a quick little synopsis, because I don't want to spoil anything. Daphne had a fiance, Miles had a girlfriend. Miles' girlfriend and Daphne's fiance fall in love, or they've always been in love, so they break things off with their current relationship to go off and live in happy wonderland. So Daphne and Miles are just left in the dust. Miles has his own apartment back in wherever they live, and Daphne moves in with him. So they're both just curing their heartbreaks over their exes falling in love with each other. Okay. As you can assume, there's a lot of tension that's going to be built throughout this, a lot of difficult conversations, a lot of comedy for a book like this. And the thing that kind of really sealed the deal as a 5-star read is in these kind of rom-com books, specifically with the male characters, I don't feel any sort of raw connection to the characters, not emotionally. I'm like, okay, I'm reading about a person. There's no emotional attachment. Nope, with Funny Story, I literally felt in my bones everything Daphne and Miles were going through. Sometimes in these sort of rom-com scenarios, I feel like the girl can end up being a little insufferable or just annoying. She makes decisions that come out of left pocket. That did not happen for me. When I was reading Funny Story, I was rooting for every decision they made and the growth that they were going through and their little fake dating situationship to make their exes jealous. I was eating that up. So if you haven't already read Funny Story, you should, because there's a reason why Book Talk is explosive about Emily Henry in general. She's becoming one of my favorite romance rom-com authors for a good reason. Of course, I started yard work. Anyways, moving on to the second read of the year. I read it on my Kindle. It was The Ex by Frida McFadden. I gave it 3 stars, and it is one of her older works. It came out in February of 2019, and she has exploded as an author, both in her craft and in her popularity since that time. And one of her books are being turned into a movie, so don't take any of my low-rated reviews to heart. Why is Las Vegas so loud right now? There's so many planes going by and so much yard work. I don't want to nag too much on this book because I just didn't connect to it, but I feel like if you want to get into the thriller, suspense, mystery author specifically with Frida McFadden, this is a good one to start with. It's really simple. It's not scary in the least. It's just, to me, it was incredibly predictable and also at the same time confusing. With The Ex, you're trying to find out why this guy's ex-girlfriend is sort of going crazy over his new relationship and why she's doing all these things. I'm pretty sure there's like a murder / self-hurting situation, and I just don't think it was covered very great. There were a lot of plot holes to me, and then there's this build up to this huge reveal at the end. The current girlfriend's thinking, oh my gosh, I really hope my boyfriend doesn't find out about this big secret I have. If he does, it's the end of the world. And of course, in Frida fashion, she saves it for like the last page. She always likes to leave us wondering just a little bit. It was the most like blasé reveal I've ever read. It would be like me saying, y'all thought I was drinking coffee? I'm drinking tea. Like, that's how I would explain it. So that was a 3-star read for me, but I think it's more so not because the writing was bad, but because I've just read so many of Frida McFadden's book that I can kind of dish out her writing. And I kind of think this was like the wall to her creative outlet just sort of exploding and her becoming super popular. I think these collections of books that didn't do so great are what led to her amazing pieces of work. So I'll move on now. The next one is The Gilded Cage by Lynette Noni. I gave 4 stars. This is the second book in the Prison Healer series. or trilogy. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Not enough people are talking about the Prison Healer series, and I don't know why, because it's amazing. This book moved so much faster than the first one. There were a lot of questions that were answered from the first one, and then a lot of build up to the third book, which I will be reading this month in May at some point. This kind of felt like, for a fantasy, each page left me on the edge trying to find out what's gonna happen next, why Kiva is making these decisions or won't make decisions. The reason I think I gave it a 4-star is because of that fact though. One of the big plot points throughout Gilded Cage is Kiva needs to decide between 2 different things that she loves. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but she has to decide between somebody and somebody else, and she keeps going back and forth. And she does make a decision at the end, but like the whole time going back and forth was kind of annoying and a little predictable. I was like, of course she's gonna make that decision, and I just wanted to like knock her up the head with a book and be like, please decide. But the first book left on a cliffhanger, which kind of led into the second one, and this one kind of leaves on a cliffhanger as well. Not so much suspense, but just like, I need to know how this all gets tied up, because there's just so many things out in the open that needs to be finished in the third book. So if you need a fantasy that's not so heavy on the romance but really heavy on the world building, and a girl who's very strong and powerful, like fighting wise, Prison Healer, Gilded Cage, number 2. Number 4 is Want to Know a Secret by Frida McFadden. I read it on my Kindle, of course, and I gave 4 stars too. I'm just trying to read her entire book collection that she's produced because it's just a goal I've set for myself. Halfway through, I was thinking this is just kind of annoying and silly goose and makes no sense. I related to the character April so much because she's a YouTuber who does like a baking show, and it's explosive and there's a lot of secrets that are revealed, and someone's kind of stalking her through text messages. It's giving A from Pretty Little Liars, because they're like, I know what's in your backyard. I know where your son is and you don't. And I was hanging on the edge of my seat. So I really liked this, and I think because I connected with the characters so much, and that's not very typical in a thriller type situation, it was a solid 4 stars. I love Want to Know a Secret. I think the thing that could have made it a 5-star is probably if the reveal took a little longer getting to. It was just too soon, so all the suspense kind of died out faster, but then we get a lot of explaining on why the stalker psycho person is the way that they are. Next we have The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This also took me a while to read. It came out in 2021, and I've seen a lot of people kind of hate it or love it situation with this. I gave this book 4 stars, and I think the academia situation, the setting, is what really kind of put it over the top. I love Ali Hazelwood. She is also one of my favorite authors, but this isn't my favorite work of hers. Like Deep End, love it. I wrote this down as one of the reasons why this wasn't a 5-star for me and kind of brought the rating down is Olive, our main character. She keeps jumping to these conclusions out of nowhere, and I keep talking about this, but that's because I'm noticing it a lot in books and I need to just stop. I hyperfixate on things. But she would just like assume that Adam, the guy who this book is in a relationship with, is just making these decisions, but he actually hates her, and that's so not the case. Olive being a PhD candidate, and then Adam being a professor already, the sort of teacher-student situationship. And then the scenario is really interesting because I have never ever read a book like this where it really dives into the brain neurological science factors. And then I was reading a little bit about Ali Hazelwood in the back, and she moved to the United States to pursue a PhD in neuroscience. Okay, girl, that makes sense why this felt so well-rounded and incredibly researched. I just thought she really did her research or maybe hired a PhD candidate as her reference. No, she was the PhD candidate she was referencing. So I love a girl in STEM and books in STEM. They're a nice taste of real worldness. I don't know, I'm losing my train of thought. Oh, and I did write in the notes on my reading journal pumpkin spice because Olive has an addiction to it, and Adam Carlson will not take pumpkin spice. You would have to like cram it down his throat. Time for my second 5-star read of the year, which is Fearless by Lauren Roberts. This was such a shock to me. I don't think I've ever read a fantasy series trilogy where the last book gets a 5-star. Lots of times for me, the ending of these series just don't do anything justice, and I rate it kind of harshly. This was a 5-star for me, and that's not because I was reading nicely. I think it's because I had all these expectations for how I wanted things to tie together, and it did. Now, I don't want to talk about this too much because it's very popular and I know people are still reading it or about to read it. I promise I'm not going to spoil anything, but all the questions that you have in the second book in Reckless are going to be answered here, and all the things that you want to happen probably will, but also you're going to go through a lot of emotional turmoil. I don't want to talk about this too much because it's still kind of fresh out into the world, and I know if I was watching this video, I wouldn't want somebody to say something that gives something away. However, the ending does kind of leave you on a bit of a questionable note, like what's going to happen to so-and-so, because a certain character is in a certain location at the end of the book. That's all I'm going to say. And I actually follow Lauren Roberts on TikTok, and she said she did that on purpose because there's going to be a novella coming out sort of explaining things that weren't quite answered. But these are small things. They're not like the big plot points, like what's going to happen with Kai and Peyton. Are they going to fall in love? Blah, blah, blah. The big questions get answered, but it's the little tiny nugget tidbits that lead you to fall on your knees and ask why. The novella's coming out, and I did not read the other novella. Was it Powerful? I'm not much of a novella girl, and also according to a lot of the reviews, it just didn't do anything to further the plot. I probably will be reading the next one because this was 5 stars even with questions unanswered. And another side note is I know a lot of people were kind of unhappy with the ending and these little twists and turns that happened that were interesting. I liked it. I thought it was fresh. It was different from a lot of the twists and turns we see in fantasies or these big jaw-dropping reveals. So that's why I graded it 5 stars. Kudos to you, Miss Lauren Roberts. So the next one I read is Powerless by Elsie Silver, part of the Chestnut Springs series. It's kind of funny that I read Fearless and then Powerless. The Powerless fantasy series by Lauren Roberts is similar to the Chestnut Springs series by Elsie Silver because they're all titled like Powerless, Reckless, Fearless, Hopeless, that type of stuff. So a little confusing, but don't get it confused because Powerless Chestnut Springs is a small town country romance. That's a little bit different. I did give it 3 stars. I've talked about this before. I'm not gonna beat the bush too much, but it doesn't feel that much different. I did really like the female character in this book. The men in the Chestnut Springs series I just don't really connect to because I feel like they all have a similar upbringing because they're all brothers. So they're not going to be that much different from each other, whereas the girls are coming into this family with their own separate issues. So I think that brings a nice little balance to this brother and then this brother and then this brother, you know? It was still really good. It was a little predictable, of course, but all these kind of romance comedies are, so you can't let that sway you too much. And then I did write down one of my favorite quotes. I really only put quotes down from the Kindle because I can highlight it, and then when I use Goodreads to fill out my journal, it shows these highlights, you know? My favorite quote was, "He sucks the life out of you, and I want to breathe it back in." This is a very spicy series. I feel like a lot of people that read Chestnut Springs aren't necessarily reading for the nuanced, fantastic, very artistic plot line. They're kind of reading it for the spice and getting to the end where they're in love and happy. And I don't blame you because that's why I read it. And now we're on the last one. Summer in the City by Alex Astor got 3 stars from me. It was honestly kind of like a 3.5 and it could have been a 4-star. I think throughout the book it was a solid 4-star until you got to the ending. The last 100 pages kind of ruined it for me. Not that it was bad, I just did not understand the decisions that Elle was making. And I kind of predicted everything, of course. Like I wrote on Goodreads when I was a few pages from this thing I was predicting happening. I said, I swear to sweet baby Jesus, is if Elle just drops everything and goes back to California in a state of hurt or betrayal over something so small, I'm gonna throw this book across the room, and it happened. I kind of understood at first why she was so annoyed with Parker because Summer in the City, at the beginning, Elle and Parker have this meeting where they're hot and heavy. Parker says something because he judges her and she judges him, and then they move on with their lives, and then a few years later they end up living next to each other, and Elle's like, I hated you. You were my hate muse and you were what inspired me to write these scripts because of what you said to me. And she's like nagging the heck out of him because of how he quick snap judged her, but she did the same to him. Like, that was my big issue with the book, is she kept getting mad at him for all these quick little judgments or these grand gestures involving money. You're doing the same thing to him when you assume he's buying you these diamonds and pearls to buy your love. That means you're assuming that you know what he's, you know? Let me chill out. Alex Astor is a fantasy author. That's what she's kind of known for. So this is her stepping outside of her comfort zone. It's one of her first releases. And the New York setting situation, Las Vegas is very loud today, was fantastic. A lot of books that you read in New York, I don't feel very connected to the scenery. I've never been, so it's gonna take a lot for me to really feel like I'm living there, and Alex covered it perfectly. I literally felt like I was walking down these streets, exploring these shops and all that, and that's what kind of makes it more of a 3.5. I would still recommend. I think just because I didn't like the way the last quarter happened doesn't mean you won't. I wish it was longer though. Like towards the ending when it cuts off, I wanted just a little bit more. I needed like an epilogue or more. Everything boils up to this high point and they're finally happy and we don't get to see them live out their happiness for a little bit. It just cuts off. So that's like my only little qualm with it. But besides that, fantastic book, and it's so cute. Like, I keep showing it off because look at how pretty she is. And for a hardback, like a hardback that's this beautiful color, sold, because I'm not much of a hardback girly. So including my Kindle reads, this has been my recollection of my month of reading in April, and it was honestly such a good month of reading. I may have given out some 3 stars here and there, but they were still good books, and these 5 stars were fantastic. I'm currently in a little romance era. I'm reading a lot of them back to back. And then I think once I'm done with that, I'm gonna get back into fantasy. I like to go back and forth, keep it fresh. Also, I stopped doing TBR jars for a little bit because I have ADHD. So if I'm told that I need to read this book next month, I'm not going to. And that's what happened when I did it for a couple months. I drew these books and I said, oh, I have to read that, and I never did. And they're still sitting there. The books that I said I would, I did not read. It's fun to like draw these prompts out of the jar, but realistically, I don't read them. And maybe I'll get on that. I probably won't. I'm more of a mood reader. Whatever spur of the moment feels right is what I'm gonna pick up. With that being said, this is my little recap for the month of April. I am very grateful for all these books and for the ability to escape from day-to-day life by just diving into fiction. So if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys!